Welcome back to Cheap Pop, everybody. This is Derek Kirby, joined again by Matt Carlin. We are talking Neon Genesis Evangelion, and if I had my full script up and ready for me for this intro, I would have already hit that right out of the gate. But let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a show or movie and thought, well, what the hell was that about? Well, then grab some popcorn because we have just the podcast for you. Once again, welcome back to Cheap Pop, where my friend Matt and I try to take a film, television show, video game, maybe don't quote me on that, break it down, flip it, and reverse it while giving you our insights, analysis, and some interesting facts and tidbits you might not know. I'm Derek Kirby, but today your host is actually Matt Carlin, and we're looking at episode 22 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. That episode title, Staying Human. Matty boy, how you doing?
I'm good. I took something different away from this episode that I think you did, as we discussed a little bit. Is you love this episode, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Not a huge fan. Not a huge fan.
All right.
I think that it took too long for me to get a backstory after I've been almost like led into hating this character so much.
Yeah.
So
that's a fair criticism of Evangelion as a whole, honestly. Like we talked about that with the Birth of Nerve episode, the previous episode, how like a lot of these things feel like they should have been dropped in along the way. Like you could still have a later episode in the series called The Birth of Nerve that fills in some of this, but it was just too condensed, like too much thrown at you at once, where it's like you could have balanced this better, where it didn't feel like you were getting to the end and you're like, oh shit, okay, throw everything that we haven't fit in elsewhere already, and they're just going to have to take it now, like just understand it. That's kind of what this episode is in its character deconstruction. So that's fair.
it's like going into Breaking Bad, but like missing some of like the first beats of the show. It's like I love him at the end because I know him.
Yeah.
And because I've seen his full transition. But Asuka, we get halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really halfway through where she is and in the show. Not really halfway, like 7-8 episodes, but still, we're far in. She's already developed at this point. She's got her own character backstory that we don't have any information on. So it's like it's hard to love her because the show's just progressively making me hate her.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh wait, don't hate her though because this, and I'm like, nope, already established my opinion, and I'm stuck.
Yeah, fair enough.
So this is her backstory. We start off in Germany with Kaji. And she's talking about Masato being there before Kaji was.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, she's coming on to him like she always does. So
this is definitely her most forward advance we've ever seen with Kaji. She's, like, popping open the shirt, like, look at me, I'm an adult. Like, oh, child.
I'm an adult.
Kaji's, like, looking around, like, there's no police around thinking I'm making this happen, right? No one thinks that I'm initiating this. Yeah, he plays it cool, but it's definitely one of those scenes where you're just like, good God, child, walk it back.
Yeah, when I thought this was originally part of the last episode, which this is what I told you will not play into the context at the start that it would at the finish.
Yeah.
But I thought this was the end of the last episode, and I was getting close to it. So she says a line that says, I'd say yes 1,000,000 times if you just asked me to kiss you, or other things too.
Yep.
And then my next one was, and then they had sex. But they didn't.
God,
and
no, thankfully not.
Really? It would have been something to talk about.
Oh, man, this show has a lot of criticisms of certain dynamics. That one doesn't need to be added to the mix. But
I don't know. We're already, it's a Japanese thing.
Let's I know. You just don't know what's coming your way is the thing. So
oh, there's more?
Yeah, we'll get there, separate conversations. But yeah, it's a very and it's the night before episode 8, the events of episode 8 take place when Kaji and Asuka arrive in Japan and they're on the naval ship or whatever. And you get the underwater battle with Unit 2 and that basically whale-looking angel.
Cool was episode. The day before. I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, they say that they're heading to Japan tomorrow and meeting with Misato. She was here before you. Like, that's kind of what that beat was. But yeah, it's very interesting seeing that. It's almost jarring because it it feels like a weird full circle thing. Like we just ended last episode with like, and Kaji's dead. Next episode, here's Kaji. Like it's a flashback, but you're just like, oh, okay, weird. But the whole idea of this is just kind of establishing how she is completely. We've known she's been obsessed with Kaji, but it's just further showing like her hangups and her need to be seen doesn't just limit to needing praise. It's that she's desperate not to be viewed as a child. And so we're going to basically run through this like little flash here of her trauma at the very start. We're going to kind of see a glimpse of that because as she's trying to like basically pull open her shirt and tell him to like look at her, that she's not a child or whatever, you get that almost like glass shattering effect, which I think is obviously supposed to be her like kind of psyche fracturing a little bit. And you get the flash cut of her trauma, and you see this creepy ass doll that its head is laying on the ground next to it. There's droplets of blood everywhere, and you're just like, oh, this is going to be one of those episodes. It kind of feels like it's Asuka's version of the Shinji and the Direxie episode when he was in like on the train. It's basically Asuka's version of that, and you're like, oh boy, okay. The first time viewing this, that's the point where I was just like, all right, settle in. This is going to be a lot. And my God, was it a lot, because my hand was cramping trying to take notes on this. So we open immediately with child Asuka, about 5 years old, at her mother's graveside. It's the funeral being conducted and everything. And we hear from conversations going on around Asuka, very brazen conversation, by the way, in front of the child, no less. Like, yeah, I guess you're basically drawing that like her mother was a researcher at Nerve Europe, which is basically the Germany branch, and was irreparably harmed in some way by direct contact. That resulted in her basically having a full mental breakdown and eventually committing suicide. So that's an interesting thing. You're like, ooh, okay, that's harsh. And
Yeah,
then
and when they talk about direct contact, are we supposed to assume that's direct contact with an angel? Because that shouldn't have. I mean,
no,
the last event was the second impact, right?
right. It's confusing in the context of the episode. I think I know what they're saying. It's not in this episode, and I don't want to get into it because it goes into a reveal.
Spoiler
But what I
territory.
take, yes, yeah, essentially, I think it's a similar. Nope, can't even go there. It gets better
Skip.
explored later. Yeah, better explored later. So yeah, we're having this funeral and everything, and she's basically trying to process everything going on. There's someone that's telling her like, oh, she's not crying, she's just stoic, as she's like looking over her mom's
Stoic.
gravesite.
She's
Yeah,
pissed. She looks pissed.
yeah, that's fair. It's more of like a brooding anger than it is emotionless. And even before the funeral, we see that while her mom was still alive, sitting in the hospital bed and everything, she's speaking to that same doll we saw earlier, but she's addressing it like it's Asuka. She's talking to it like it's Asuka, trying to get the doll to eat food. Asuka's just like looking at her mom through the window of the hospital room. And it's not even like the mom's not aware of her, but she doesn't register that it's her daughter, because as she's talking to the doll, she's like, oh, if you don't eat your food, that little girl in the doorway is going to think I'm a bad mother, or something to that effect. Like, what will that little girl in the door think? And you're just like, oh, okay. So that's like a full psychotic break then. And then we get some interesting conversation with I think it's a female doctor. It could be a nurse, but I think it's a doctor. Um, do you want to get into that?
Um, yeah, this is where the woman doctor and the man doctor are talking to each other. It feels weird when I say it that way, but
Do you want? Okay.
this is a man and a woman having a conversation.
But there is some
Excuse me.
important context. The man, it is a doctor, but it's actually Asuka's father.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
wait. How do you know this? Did it say this?
Yes, it says this.
Dear Lord, what am I? Did I watch this
He's
episode?
Doctor Soryu. She's Asuka Langley
Yeah,
Soryu.
I didn't pick that up.
Yeah. So it's Asuka's. That's why I'm saying I think it's Asuka's father and either another woman doctor um, or maybe a nurse or something. But they're basically talking, and the nurse is saying. And by the way, I don't know that he's a medical doctor even, but he is listed as Doctor Soryu. So there, the female in this case is saying her condition hasn't changed. She keeps talking to that doll, thinking it's her daughter. To which he answers, maybe it's a reflection of her guilt. She was so wrapped up in her research that she had little time for our daughter.
Mm.
Um, and so it's kind of creepy in this sense. Like we're kind of meant to believe that like the dad is like trying to cope as well, but maybe the wife has been so Asuka's mother has been so wrapped up in her own career. Not only has she not been a great mother necessarily to Asuka, kind of absentee like Risuko's mother, but also sort of drawn distant maybe from her husband a little bit, because as he's having this conversation with the female doctor, they start really pontificating on this idea of like God and like what if humans are in a way kind of like dolls themselves, because she's talking to that doll like it's her daughter, but really if you think about it, like we're all just kind of God's dolls. It's almost like you imagine like taking like a big hit of like a toke or something, like, oh man, you ever think about if we're like God's dolls or whatever?
That's so accurate. And the second that happened, I just thought to myself, I was like, this is going to be the whole damn episode they talk about dolls. And like from this point forward, they're just going to bring up dolls like it's been happening the whole season. What happens? They talk about
Mm-hmm.
dolls the whole episode.
Yeah. And so Asuka's father is kind of like surprised by the doctor, the woman doctor or nurse or whatever, because she's like, oh, if God does exist, perhaps we're made in his image. And he's like, oh, that's very unexpected um, perspective from a medical professional. And she's like, well, I am a human above all and a woman. And you're
And a
like,
woman.
yeah, I was like, that's a weird thing to say. But then we cut to a close up of pissed off Asuka, and in the background, you can hear faint like sex occurring. And you're like, oh, okay. So her mother is literally in the hospital with a psychotic break, and her dad is banging the nurse or something
I mean,
in
what
the
better
other.
time?
Yeah. And so I'm like, I kind of understand now why Asuka last episode says she hates her father. I feel like I'm grasping that now. This 5-year-old trying to grasp the impossibility of what all has happened in this short time. And it's even worse than we see here. It gets worse. uh, so yeah, there's some conflicted feelings there. And the nurse goes on to become the new stepmother eventually. Just by the way, when that's introduced later. So yeah, maybe the father, his method of coping with seeing his wife descend into this madness, he's just looking for some comfort of his own, and he finds that in the pants of another woman. And Asuka is just kind of like left there, not knowing how to process anything. So yeah, there's a lot weighing just on that alone. Um, but then we cut back to the funeral itself. Do you want to pick it back up from there?
Let's see. No, I want you to pick it up from there because
All
what I
right.
wrote in my notes was Asuka's a little psychopath, and then
Yeah.
I'm talking about her sync rates. So maybe
Yeah.
I skipped
You're a
right
little
over the
ahead.
funeral.
Yep. I got just a couple quick notes here. So back at the funeral there, a family friend is trying to tell Asuka she's so brave that it's okay to cry. And Asuka just says she doesn't need to cry because she'll think for herself.
Yes.
And this is just her donning this mask that she'll wear to the outside world. Basically, she's determined to be self-sufficient and prove herself to be unneeding of others. And really, the reality of this is, try as she might, she ultimately does need people, just like anybody needs someone. Um, and then we get into the sync rate test you were going into on this. So I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, so she's down 8 points and dropping. And at this point, she's getting to be low enough where they decided to choose to focus on Unit 0, since they only have resources to fix one Ava at a time.
Mhm.
Now, it sounds like they've got enough supplies to fix both, but they can't focus on doing them both at the same time. My guess is because manpower is
Yeah.
lessened significantly.
Yeah,
Um,
and they even have a comment in there that her sync rate is so low at this point, it's barely enough to even activate the Ava.
and I think that is a little further down, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the secondary sync rate test that they do, where they
Oh,
mention
the
that.
harmonics test? Yeah,
Mhm.
you're right.
And they talk about, so they're getting into Unit 2 at this point, and they're saying the mitosis process on left arm, Unit 2, net target values, and necrosis is below 0.05.
Yeah, I gloss over that
Nerd,
stuff.
nerd, nerd, nerd. I said nerd talk. I'm not doing it.
Yep.
So we start construction on the. Oh, we're talking about starting construction on Ava Unit 13, up to 13 in 7 different locations, which is information that they got out of Shanghai. This is
Yeah.
Masato having this conversation at this point, I believe.
She's going full Kaji at this point. She's picking up the ball where he left off, and she's trying to run with it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. She's setting up these meetings and stuff. Now, it's the guy from the command center with glasses. I don't know his name, but he's helping her kind of do this digging and everything. And all the while, she's sort of pontificating again on what the Avas are. And I wrote what she had here. Her quote. She says, "The Ava series, all born of Adam. We can't defeat the angels without using the very thing that caused the second impact. In their desperation, man is willing to work with the scourge that threatened their very existence. That's humanity for you. Deep down, maybe I really do hate the Avas. They killed my father." Which is pretty apt, I would say in this case. Like, yeah, it is a little ironic that like this thing nearly wipes out humanity, and you're like, well, what are you gonna do? I guess we're just gonna have to try and use it ourselves to fight back. I I don't know. It's kind of like, oh, are you opening a can of worms with that? Maybe, but in some sense, do you really have a time or a chance to second guess or hesitate? You know, like you're kind of already in a race against time. If that's the only thing available to you, maybe you just have to fight the necessary evil in this case.
I I feel at this point while I'm watching the episode that I'm like, this just seems like rehashed conversations that we've had. Like I feel like we've already had these discussions and we're just
Hmm.
repeating them again. Um, and really, what do I want to be seeing at this point? I want to see Ava Unit 1, and they're
Hmm.
not giving it to me, and I'm getting frustrated, and I'm mad that I have to watch other things because I want to see what's going to happen next.
Those
But we
blue
keep
balls won't
going
last much longer.
backwards, and I don't like it. So
Yeah.
they talk about cannibalizing. I like the wording they use. They're cannibalizing parts from Unit 5 and 6 out of Germany.
Yep.
I don't know if we discussed 5 and 6, but there they
They were just
are.
the two units that were in Germany when that base was lost. That was so in the wreckage they found parts from those Avas, and they're just cannibalizing those parts to make repairs.
Now, Unit 4 was the only functional unit, though, right? Was 5 and 6 functional, or was it just in midst of
I don't think they
rebuild?
were 5 and 6 weren't still functional. I think they were just parts that were left, like in the wreckage, that could be used. If I recall, 4 was in Germany at the time, but it was technically the US's unit, and the US didn't trust it, and so it was flown from Germany as the only one still working from the wreckage and brought to Japan. That's my recollection of it. But yeah, the mass production of these Avas all the way up through Unit 13 in 7 different locations around the world. So Nerve is expanding. We had 3, we lost 1, and now we're going up to 7 apparently. All right, we're rushing to mass produce, and we've apparently doubled the budget. Interesting,
Yeah,
considering we've talked about these repairs bankrupting countries already.
which is funny because, you know, before everyone is relinquishing their Avas and power to Japan, and now
Hmm.
everyone's building them for themselves, which is a very big shift and a quick shift at that. So, yeah, they talk about this doubling of the budget and the council being nervous. The guy with glasses, I believe, at this point is saying, you know, maybe they're worried about simultaneous angel attacks. And Masato kind of comes to the conclusion that something else is going on that is pushing this type of decision. but she's in the same boat as Kaji, I feel,
Hmm.
was most of the time, is he's got part of the story, but what's the rest?
Yeah. Yep. And then
So we get
from
to our dinner table awkward conversation.
okay, before the dinner table though, I think don't we have Asuka trying to call Kaji? Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe.
so Asuka tries to call Kaji, gets the recording that his phone number has either been shut off, disconnected, whatever, and she's confused by that. Obviously, we know she's called him a ton of times. He never answers, but now it's not even registering. And so the idea we're setting up here is that she's totally alone, effectively, at this point, because she's already sort of isolated herself from the others, but she does still want Kaji. And so now that he's gone, she is totally alone, and she turns around and sees Shinji and Rei at the train station. And at first she seems surprised, but then she very quickly turns bitter. And her quote here is, again, referring to Shinji. She says, "You were absorbed for an entire month into your Ava and just got out recently. Now look, those two are back together like nothing ever happened." And then she says, "Sure, you beat me, but how?" And it's just like, it's that competitive shriek of not being able to accept sort of that, but it's also the bitterness that like she's not included in that, even though it's her that's pushing people away and like making this real divide. You could say she's tried to reach out to Rei, but like anytime Shinji does try to connect with her in some way, she draws back even angrily and lashes out at him. But I think that's the thing she's upset with, not just that she sees them, but like, oh, look at them getting along, because we know she was jealous in the past, thinking that Shinji was into Rei.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
now
she
dinner table.
just hates the world.
Yeah,
Um,
she's getting to that point very quick.
yeah. So dinner table awkwardness, where this kind of spawns off of, she's already pissed, but the phone starts ringing and she goes off into this. Oh, it's probably just Kaji from Misato. La la la
Mm-hmm.
la 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 la. And you're just like, dear Lord, child, you don't even know what's going on.
Yep.
But Misato handles it very well and
Hmm.
kind of moves on with her life. But
Yeah.
Asuka gets this. The phone call turns out to be from her mom, stepmom,
Mm-hmm.
dear God, and she starts speaking in German, which her German accent is hilarious. I was like cracking up listening to it. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's just because it's so weird because we haven't heard it, but
I
it's
think she's just being fake, and so it sounds
very fake. Yeah,
extra over the top.
yeah. And she has a conversation. I didn't get the exact quote, but she says something along the lines of, she starts opening up to Shinji, just saying that, like, yeah, that's not my real mom. That's my stepmom. Like, we're just doing our pleasantries thing. So it's not really something to be jealous of because it's not real,
Yeah.
which goes into the fake conversation aspect of things. And
Mm-hmm.
then she immediately gets furious because she's decided to open up to another person and
Yeah.
is now mad at Shinji for her telling him things.
Yeah. Yeah. Shinji, initially, he's just like, "Oh, well, even if it is just mundane family stuff, I'm jealous. I wish I had that." And she's like, "Oh, it's really nothing special. It's just, it's just been tough after." Wait, why am I telling you this? You're an idiot. And he's just like, what? You get mad when I don't try, then you get mad when I do? There's no winning for Shinji at
There's
this
no
point.
winning.
It's impossible. So yeah, you see, she just doesn't know how to process any of this stuff. She doesn't know how to work through anything. She feels very defensive. If she is hurt or hurting in any way, her only instinct is to guard herself because she doesn't like feeling vulnerable. And so here, even just the slightest detection that she's opening up and sharing something that is private and really no one other than maybe Kaji, maybe Masato would know, to her almost feels like a violation. And so she gets angry about that. And then we start to spiral on that anger a little bit.
Yeah, so with the water, she's about to take a bath and
I
she
do have
starts.
some context for that too when you're ready.
Oh, okay, yeah. So she goes off just saying, like, this water has been used by Masato and Shinji. I don't want to use it because they've used it. And, like,
Yeah.
the toilet water and this and this. And then it's the air that they breathe. And she hates them both. And
Yep.
then she goes into, I hate the first. I hate my dad. I hate my mom. But I hate myself the most.
Yeah. So on the bathwater thing, that is a cultural thing in Japan. It is common. for families to draw bathwater and use the same water. Sounds kind of gross to me, but that's not uncommon. So like initially, I'm like, when she says that, I'm like, that's reasonable. You're not even from this country, so it's not your custom. That probably would seem gross. But then she starts going further with it, like, and I'm not going to use the toilet that they just sat on. I'm like, if it's still warm or stinks, I agree. Sure, that's reasonable. I'm not going
They're
to use the
using
washing.
the exact same water.
Yeah. And I'm not going to
Okay.
use the washing machine that washed their underwear. Okay, now you're getting a little unreasonable. And she's like, I'm not going to breathe the same air as Misato and idiot Shinji. And I'm like, okay, now we're into a problem here. And then she's like, I hate Misato, I hate idiot Shinji, I hate the first. Of course, she's referring to first child Ray. And she's getting louder and louder as she's saying this. Like it's everyone can hear her at this point. We focus on Misato like listening, like with a sort of almost irritated kind of focused look from her room. But surely Shinji also hears this because she's just belting it out, letting everyone know how much she hates everything. I hate my dad. I hate my mom. But the one I hate most is me. I can't take it anymore. I've had it with this. Why do I have to put up with this? Why? And it's just like, yeah, you're about to be in full free fall here. I think if I'm Misato at that point, I'm already grounding her from missions, even being shorthanded, because the last place I think she needs to be is the Ava. Her depleting or her dropping sync rates and everything are clearly feeding into this. I know Misato goes on in the next scene, I think, to muse about like it's not just the defeats that she suffered recently, it's also the fact that she was surpassed by Shinji that's kind of making it significant. And so it's like, yeah, I don't think the best place for her is to keep putting her in the thing. Like if her failing rate with the Ava is part of what's driving this, and Shinji meanwhile is rising, 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 I don't think putting her back in that environment is the best thing to do.
Yeah. This right here is going to tell you how your feelings and my feelings differ on the episode. After
Yep.
we get through the bath and like the hate the first, hate my dad, hate my mom, hate myself, I just wrote, I wish she was the one who died.
She's there with you.
I,
Yeah.
I just I honestly thought she was going to stop breathing when she said she hated the air that they're like sharing.
Just
air
hold
with
her
them.
breath until
Just
she
hold her
passed out
breath
and
until
cracked
she
her head.
passed out. Would have been so fair for her character. Like,
Oh my god.
I wish they did it. I'm kind of sad that they didn't. So we get to the next part here. They're talking about
it's the
this
harmonics
is where
test.
the sync rate is so low that it's barely even enough for activation, which just shows you like she is literally spiraling as much as possible. Like she can barely even get this Ava to work at this point. So
Yeah.
Misato makes what typically would be something you'd hear from like a male
man.
character in a show, but she's like, maybe it's because she's on her period.
Yeah.
Which I cracked up laughing when she said that. And Risuko says, yeah, that's not it. That doesn't have anything to do with something like so superficial. It's
Yep.
all in her subconscious at this point.
Yeah, I took that too as like, I know obviously Misato, a female character saying this, we give it a little bit more credence, but I feel like in a lot of cases that's like the almost dismissive thing of like when a woman is angry or like in some form of like distress, it's explained away as like, oh, she's just on her period, doesn't know how to deal with it. That's almost the tone I got, even though it's Misato saying it. And maybe it wasn't meant to be that way. Maybe it was her like genuinely how she in her mind is rationalizing Asuka's extra bitchiness lately. But it felt like a dismissive sort of thing. And even Risuko like shoots that down immediately as like, no, because that's superficial. That has nothing to do with the Ava and the connection there. But it's just, I think, another thing of Misato just trying to like bat away the idea of like, I don't know what Asuka's issue is. If it's this, she'll get over it. It's fine. I don't. It's almost like deflecting her own responsibility and trying to step in and help resolve the issue.
See, and I did get that a little bit, and even getting into like a real life sense of that explanation. I mean, if you take men and women just being so different from one another, like men don't have a way that you can track how their like physiology is working at the time. Whereas if you think of like a menstrual cycle, there are very different phases and it will impact the way that you act. Now, it is always usually meant in like a very like misogynistic, like hey, they're just on their period. Like, that's
Right.
why they're acting like that. But I think Misato also is like, in that scene, even though it does come across a little bit like that, she's seeing like the real sense of like, oh, it does actually affect your body chemistry. Like, it is changing the way that
Hmm.
you're going to be emotionally, and like, based on where she is now, we have to understand that like that is going to be part of her emotional state, and are we accounting for that? So I think it was a little bit of both. It was a little
Yeah.
snarky, but there was also like some realism in there.
Yeah. And the interaction then we get with Risuko and Misato is another very cold one between them. Um, after Risuko bats away the idea of the period being the reason for these dropping scores or whatever, um, Risuko says basically Asuka's pride is in shambles, to which Misato says, well, yeah, how could she not lose her confidence after a defeat like that? But I think it was losing to Shinji that made it significant. All three of us living together might not be the best idea anymore. And Risuko takes a real dig at that point, almost like you done trying to be housemaker? Yeah. Very much just a bitchy kind of slap back. And Misato just, again, she is the master of the bitch slap when it comes to Risuko. This one's a verbal bitch slap, but she's like, I don't need to take any crap from someone who substitutes cats for human companionship. And it's like, I feel like Risuko could have clapped back one more time with Misato. I know she in the last episode seemed to indicate that Kaji is the only guy she's ever been with, but very much does not give off that vibe in other interactions. So it's just like, okay. But even Risuko's kind of like glancing away, like, she's kind of got me there.
Yeah, she was definitely like, the hit hurt. You could tell by looking at Risuko's face.
Mm-hmm.
I even took I wrote down what the caption was on for the subtitle, because
Yeah.
it was a little different.
Yep.
And it was something along the lines of drowns her loneliness with cats.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, ouch. Gosh, that was good. And like, you could just see in her face, like, yep, that hurt. Please don't say things like that.
Yeah. Yep.
So we go into the next part. She's
looking in the bathroom mirror, Asuka.
yeah, pissed about having her period, being a woman, saying she never wants to have children. Essentially, like, why do I have to go through these things of being a woman if I'm not like going to have a child?
Yeah, and I think they imply in the episode it's her first period, which she's 14, 15, so I guess maybe
should've happened before then.
I would have thought, but I don't. I'm a guy. I'm a white man. I'm not gonna try and profess that I know all this. But I thought like I would have guessed already. But there was something someone said in the episode where I was like, oh, well, okay, if it's her first, then maybe that does give validity to why Misato is saying like maybe that's the reason, because she doesn't know how to handle it. To which I would then say, all the more reason you should step in and try and say something if you think that's the problem. If you should try to talk to Asuka and work through it instead of just leaving her out there on an island, pissed off at the world and alone. But yeah. And, real quick, harkening back to that phone call earlier in the episode, Asuka says like, oh, it's probably just Kaji calling to talk to you. Misato, her response is, that's not going to happen, which is true. I don't think that Asuka grasps what that means, because I feel like if she knew like, oh, Kaji's like gone, or if she somehow knew dead, I feel like she would have come unglued way worse faster. And that's
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
she overlooks it completely.
Yeah. And that's actually the one good break for her, is that she didn't just have to completely come unglued there, because I think that would have just destroyed her up front at that point. But yeah, back to this part, she's pissed off about getting her first period because she was born a woman and she doesn't even want kids. She thinks it's stupid. She's still just ranting and raving about everything. And then we get, I think, in the series, there are 4 moments like this. I think this is the
longest
third one.
Elevator ride ever.
Yeah. And I'll give them credit for this. These moments, it's not that there's zero animation, because you will occasionally get a character blinking or like scratching their nose, but it's minimal animation. And I don't know how long this goes on for, but it is the most tense elevator ride I have ever seen. And you're just waiting, like, you can tell Asuka is just waiting for Rei to say something. She's in her head, she's thinking like, oh, I wish a bitch would. I wish she would just open her fucking mouth right now, because I can't wait to clap back at her. And normally you would assume Rei wouldn't say anything, but we talked recently about how Rey kind of seems a little different now. And so not only does Rey actually say something, she's actually trying to be a little bit direct and like not she's being helpful, but like not sugarcoating it, if that makes sense. So she's like, she basically just after this 40-second plus silence says an Ava won't do anything unless you open your heart to it, which is true. You can't be guarding yourself against it. The whole point is you're creating this almost psychological bridge between you and the Ava. And if Asuka is closing herself off, then she's not going to be able to connect with the Ava and do anything with it. But just the fact that Rey is at this point that she's even voicing that, I was like, oh wow, she's moved forward quite a bit. This is not something she would have done before.
Yeah, it's funny with her mentioning, won't open up to you if you don't put your heart in it, because I would say that she is the most devoid of heart character we have.
I think it's outwardly. I think internally we've seen moments where she has expressed very big thoughts and like pondering life and what it means to be alive, things like that. I think it's all internal is the thing. And so with an
I wouldn't
Ava,
put
that's
that as
probably a
hard, though.
very yeah, I don't know. I think with the Ava, it's a more intimate connection that feels natural to her
Hmm.
as opposed to talking with other people where you don't know. And the closest we see with her being open with anyone, she has a moment or two with Shinji, but really it's Gendo is the only person she's ever had any kind of connection with.
Yeah, I guess that definitely seems like there's a little bit of heart in that connection,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to like the whole Rasuko with the Magi. Well, Rasuko's mother with the Magi and
Yeah.
talking about transferring consciousness, which I believe is very much Rey. Is like she's got all the pieces of who that person used to be, but
Mm-hmm.
she's lacking the heart aspect of it. Like all of the things are clicking. There's a brain there. It just doesn't have the same emotional impact, which is why everything comes across as like so robotic. But I think in a sense that probably is even more attractive to Gendo because that's how he kind of naturally is.
Mm-hmm.
Is he doesn't really have much of a heart. He is more robotic and like calculated, and he's essentially turned the person that he was with into himself a little bit. And I think he probably likes Ray more than he ever liked his wife.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my
so
take.
yeah, Asuka basically claps back of like, "Oh, you're accusing me of putting up walls inside. Is that what you're saying?" Ray's pretty much like, "Yes, that's exactly what I just said." But she's like, "Yeah, each Ava has a heart." And then you mentioned this earlier. We're back to kind of the doll metaphor here. Asuka referring to the Ava says that thing has a heart, and it's like, I feel like you should know that the Ava has a core or power source and that it's called an artificial human. I feel like you should know this in a literal sense. Maybe you mean it in a more symbolic sense, like a soul. Avas don't have souls. The souls are effectively the pilots that are put into them. And the pilots, we've talked before, like, why are the pilots children? A condition is that the pilots have to be people, and it's not explained why, but have to be people that were born after the second impact. And so I think it's a free of original sin sort of thing. Um, the humanity that sparked the impact isn't able to do it, and I think that is implied what went wrong for Shinji's mom in that test. That's my theory. But
So why
yes,
do you think that her clone is able to do it?
that
Because
gets
she's
into
made
different
anew.
territory, and I don't want to stray too much further in that territory. But
Okay.
um, and it's more to say that like I have strong feelings and theories on this, but they dance into spoiler territory. So I'll walk it back and just get back to the point on this here. So uh, talking about what that doll has a heart, meaning the Ava, and Ray's basically just like, yeah, you know you're doing this. That's exactly what I'm saying. And Asuka is like, oh, well, if you're trying to start a conversation with me, then hell must have frozen over. Fair point. I don't think Ray has ever engaged Asuka directly. Um, and then she's like, what? Does it make you happy that I can't pilot my Ava anymore? What's there to be worried about anyway? The invincible Shinji will save us whenever an angel attacks. Just leave it to him and he'll take care of everything. Shinji is the only one of us that even needs to be here. It's unbelievable. First, Shinji treats me like a wounded dog, and then, like clockwork, Doll thinks she can do the same thing. I really must have lost my edge. And Ray does take a little bit of exception to being called a doll, which again is another thing that like feels different for Ray compared to the start of the series, where I think before she just would have been like, nah, whatever, like I'm not. But she does seem to kind of be like a little bit defensive about that. But then Asuka's like, I bet you if Commander Akari ordered you to kill yourself, you would. Ray's like, yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and then Asuka just slaps the crap out of her face, and Ray doesn't say anything. She's like, "You are a doll. From the very first moment I met you, I hated you for being a puppet. I hate you. I hate all of you." And that's like as Asuka's like stepping off the elevator, just trembling with rage. And I'm just like,
I think she's afraid at this point too. Like at
yeah,
least I got that out of the scene. Like, and I thought Ray is like maybe to the point in her character arc that she's going to fight back. And it seemed like Asuka was kind of prepared for that too. She's like, "Well, I just slapped the shit out of her, so what's
yeah,
she gonna do right now?"
yeah, yep. Then we get a quick interstitial with the empty classroom at school. None of the pilots are attending anymore. Shinji's already been gone for several days. Asuka hasn't been back. Ray hasn't been there. And Shinji's friend Glasses, Kinsuke or whatever, is just kind of just feeling sad because, man, if school isn't important anymore, then things must be really bad. Like, yes, kid, things are bad. Things are not going well for you
Still
having.
mentioned Toji, by the way.
Yeah, he's still in the hospital, they say.
Of course, no one knows.
Yeah. So you have like this whole thing going on where it's like, yeah, for the kid who apparently listens to like these transmissions and stuff and gets the news about like incoming Ava Unit 4 and stuff, he sure is in the dark that Shinji disappeared for a month into the LCL. That wasn't talked about. Or the fact that all this shit going on with with Asuka and everything else. Like, I feel like you should be at least dimly aware of this, but whatever. It's not an important scene. It's just an interstitial just to have other people around them just observing like, ooh, things must be going poorly. Yes, thank you, Mr. Foreshadowing. Let's move forward. So, at Nerve HQ, Unit 2 appears to be back in full working order, and Asuka is kind of dressing it down. Like, if your belief is that this thing is a living thing to an extent, and that you have to connect with it on some emotional, spiritual, whatever level to operate it well, I feel like the assumption would be maybe don't dress it down and almost blame it for like, I can't believe, how dare you lose like that? Don't forget, you're my doll, so you have to follow my orders. Just do everything exactly like I tell you and don't complain. Why does a weapon even have to have a mind of its own anyway? It just ends up getting in the way. If you obey my commands, everything will go perfectly. You'll see. And it's just like, if I'm the Ava, I'm just like, like, I'm not going to do anything you ask me to do. Yep. And it's just like, she's talking to the Ava, which would make it seem like she's kind of trying to apply what Ray said. But even then, she kind of mutters to herself, like, this is so dumb. And it's like, yeah, I don't think you're going to get anywhere through this conversation. But it is funny to me that she immediately, like, she kind of tells Ray off or like thinking, like, you think that thing's alive or you think that thing has a heart? And then she's like, all right, Unit 2, let's rap for a minute here.
Let's talk real quick.
I need you to cut the shit. How dare you lose and how dare you take so long to repair? Just like, all right. And then we get an alarm blaring and it's another angel attack and you're just like, ooh, beep, beep, beep. Yeah, that's not going to be good. I'll let you
second title card of
jump in. Yeah.
So it's saying that at this point the angel is in satellite orbit, which the Ava cannot attack it in, and that's because there is. I mean, first of all, we're in the situation where, and they'll get into this. I'm skipping ahead just a little bit. Okay. If they lift it up high to go attack it, they are pretty much in direct line of sight, sitting duck until they get in position. So they're trying to have a little bit of cover. The issue is that if they shoot it from where they are now, we are to find out that it can't penetrate the AT field because it doesn't have enough energy at this point.
Well, even before that, it's out of range. So it's initially out of their range, and then they have to make an adjustment on the power to try and account for it. But that's still a beat or two ahead. So Misato, when they're going into battle, she wants to send Ray as the first line, and Asuka is on support. But Asuka just flat out, Asuka just flat out goes like, no, I'm going. And she literally, I didn't even know they could do this. She literally just like engages the elevator herself to like rocket her up there to go take point on this. And, she's defying orders, but then Misato tells the command center to stand down and just like let her take point if she wants to. And I'm like, fucking why? She's completely unstable. Like this isn't a harmonics test where the worst thing is she gets a bad score. No, this is literally life and death, humanity's life and death potentially. And you're just like, oh, whatever, you're completely coming unglued. Whatever, you go do it. You take point. I'm like, you don't mess with that. That's so stupid. And
Yeah.
it just feels like another moment where Misato is like kind of just forsaking her a little bit. Like, I don't care. I'm almost like she's sharing your attitude. Like, I'm so annoyed by you and over you. I'm just gonna like let you run off into a hellfire of bullets if that's what you want.
Yeah, and Rasuko makes mention. She's like, so pretty. I believe it's Rasuko at this point, and she said, yeah, if she fails, she's pretty much out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I think we're all under the same agreement here. Like, this is the last straw. Like, you're not letting anyone. You're not taking commands. You're not passing your rates. Everything's going bad at this point. So
And if she
they're
loses
already,
again, imagine what that'll do to her confidence after that. It's yet another failure.
yeah. And they already start discussing looking for another pilot that can replace Asuka.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Unit 1, Shinji, is still grounded by Gendo.
Yep.
Shinji's sitting in Unit 1, I believe, looking like he's asleep almost, just because he's waiting to see if he can
Yeah,
get activated.
I think he's just like almost like focusing, like just kind of like getting into that mindset. He's eager, he wants to go, but he can't. So he's almost just like sitting there, just like tense and just like waiting to spring into action. So he's like almost visualizing, who knows? Maybe he's doing like in his mind, he's like, curl the fist, open the fist, curl the fist. That's how he psychs himself up. Yeah. Um, and I like too that you get this like just torrential downpour as well. Like you don't get a lot of rainy scenes in Evangelion. It's usually like middle of the day stuff. So the fact that you're in just a downpour as Unit 2 comes up, I was like, okay. Not only is that ominous, but that is kind of cool. And it does not go well. But Asuka even acknowledges as she's awaiting her rifle that she knows if she fails, she's done. She loses Unit 2. She's like, yeah, they'll probably take Unit 2 away from me if I can't do this. And so she's basically just like, oh, I'm not going to lose. But she's not really. She's waiting for the angel to come into range. It's not in range yet. And so she's basically just standing there, aiming down the sight, waiting to shoot. And then we get a flash of light, and we start hearing "Ode to Joy."
Hallelujah,
Yeah,
hallelujah.
yeah. Blinding light looks like daylight shining on her amid all the darkness and everything. And I like how the angel is basically just cranking worldwide "Ode to Joy." Really trying to do that. Now, this angel is the 15th angel. Its name is Ariel, and it is the angel. It is the light of God, is what it is known as. That's its biblical angel it's referencing here. So appropriate that it's a form of attack would apparently be some light. And immediately as this light shines on Asuka, she is just screaming bloody murder. It is like psychological warfare, basically. It's the beam is devoid of heat energy, and there's immediate psychological contamination. And the angel is basically just probing inside of her mind, torturing her with her traumas and her insecurities. And you're like, oh, now we're really going to go into her backstory, aren't we? We're really going to explore the metaphors and everything with all of this. And it's even before like we start digging, she's like begging for it to stop and to leave her alone. Risuko is just completely stunned at this. She's like trying to figure out, like, is the angel trying to understand the human heart? And
Tie back to the Diraxi again.
yep. And you have Asuka is just flailing. The Ava is like contorting in these grotesque ways. She's firing off the rocket or the rifle just into the city, like trying to shoot something. And I'm just like, how many people are getting killed possibly in all of this? Now I know they go to like shelters and stuff, so they're probably underground, but I'm just like, man, she is causing a lot of destruction here. And she basically just completely empties the clip before the angels even in range. So they divert a lot of her power then to get to what you were talking about earlier with Ray shooting at the AT field. They divert a lot of the power through the umbilical cord from Unit 2, except for life support, to raise Unit Zero to try and get a more powerful, basically, shot that can reach the Angel. But even though it reaches the Angel, the bullet, the light, laser, whatever, just bends around the AT field. And it's just like, well, we're helpless here.
Yeah, we're
But
in trouble.
yeah, Misato is screaming, finally kind of understanding how much shit Asuka is in. She's screaming at her to fall back and withdraw, but Asuka refuses because she knows if she fails, she loses her Ava, and that is effectively all she has left in the world here is this purpose of being the best Ava pilot. And so she's like, I would rather die. I would rather die. At least here I have a snowball's chance in hell, a puncher's chance. I can't win if I don't stand and fight. And so she's going to stand and take as much as she can, even if it means her dying.
Yeah, Misato's literally telling her to stand down, and she's saying, "Nope, I'm gonna stick it out. I literally am just gonna die if this is where I need to die."
Mm-hmm.
And she's just the whole time this thing is happening, she's saying, "Stop looking into my heart." But every time they say heart, the subs are mind, and
Mm-hmm.
they use them so interchangeably. Heart, mind, not the same. Not the same thing.
But yeah, but in a metaphorical sense, they're
I get
often
what they're
used
meaning.
interchangeably. Yeah.
Yeah. And the subs have a much darker like context to what she's saying too. She says, "Stop raping my mind," which I think is the first time you've seen anything so graphic discussed in the show at this point.
Yeah, and I think in this context, it's actually an appropriate use, effectively, because it is a violation. It is this power dynamic, held over you, and you're having all of this stuff dredged up. Someone is seeing into every corner of your mind and heart, to use both there,
and
and
the parts that
forcing
you've been trying to close off from yourself as well.
Yes, yeah, it's a total violation. So it's shocking, even just seeing it in that context, like that word used. You're like, oh, but then you're like, yeah, no, I guess that makes sense. It's a more figurative, not in the sexual sense, but in a similar violation sense that would apply, I guess. And I think too, her realization when she's initially refusing the orders to retreat, it's similar to Shinji's prior realization that the only reason people care about him in the first place is because he pilots the Ava. But for Asuka, it's also, she also demands to be the best at it. Shinji just wants to be good enough at it that people will care. For her, it's like, I have to be the best because nothing else matters. I can't just be seen. It's like she's so desperate to be seen. It's not enough to be among the best. She has to be the best. Otherwise, she doesn't think she matters. She doesn't think anyone will notice her or care for her or anything like that. And if she can't have people's love, she at least wants their admiration, essentially. Yeah, she is. She is. I mean, that's true of all the pilots, unfortunately.
So they talk about the...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Ray, go on.
We already mentioned the firing at the AT field, so that part can be skipped over because now we're going to go into her head a little bit here, a little bit more. I was going to go into the specific imagery of that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we see Asuka then at her mother's funeral again. This time we see her, or she's bawling at the funeral, and she's like almost thinking to herself, like, that's not how I remember it, which makes me think the stone-faced, angry look we saw at the beginning is how she remembers it, whereas the bawling is probably how it actually happened. Because, yeah, like you said, she's closing off these memories. They make her angry because it's her when she feels she was weak, and she doesn't want to think of herself as weak, so she remembers it almost angrily. And now she's being forced to kind of see it itself. You see her tear apart a stuffed monkey, or rather see the after effect of it, and tosses it at her father's feet. And he's like, well, what's wrong? Don't you want, it's a gift from your new mother. Like, your new mother, don't you want it? And again, I think this is meant to be the lady doctor that her dad went and banged while her mom was basically having a psychological episode in the hospital. So Asuka stamps it out. It's like adult Asuka's foot steps on the torn monkey, and she's like, I don't need it because I'm going to grow up fast. She doesn't need to be comforted or coddled because she's just going to grow up fast. She doesn't need anybody. But she's being, just like we talked about Shinji in the Direct Sea, how the angel kind of weaponized his memories against him and took on like his younger self. The angel's doing this. This angel is doing the same thing to Asuka here. She is child Asuka is the angel essentially in this episode, and she's dredging because it knows these memories. It's basically reenacting them. So as she's saying, like, I don't need anyone, I'm going to grow up fast. The angel is, as child Asuka, saying, please look at me, mommy. Don't stop being my mommy. And it keeps cycling her running through this door. And we hear her mother say, die with me, Asuka. Child Asuka says, mommy, mommy, don't kill me, please. No, I'm not your doll, mommy. I'm going to think and live only for myself. I don't need mommy or daddy. I can live by myself. This is around the point where I was just like, okay, we're getting heavy. She's pleading with the angel to leave her alone. She's saying, stop making me remember all that. I finally forgot about it. So please don't dig it up again. I don't need those painful things anymore. Please stop it. Stop. And Asuka's mother is saying, please, Asuka, sweetie, please die with me. Child Asuka then replies, okay, mommy, I'll die with you. Just please don't stop being my mommy, okay? And then the angel kind of reveals itself a little bit. The creepy doll face turns and it says, mommy? Never heard of her. Who are you? And this is the point where she just totally snaps and we go into like this whole montage. Now, I still was trying to find confirmation on this next part. I've seen two things talking about it. The looping animation of her introducing herself over and over. You get 4 lines of dialogue. Did that scene strike you in any certain way?
Not in the way I feel like you're going to tell me about.
Okay. Did the other voices sound familiar to you?
Yeah. We're hearing a couple of people we know, like Rasuko's one of them, Misato's one of them. I believe the class rep is possibly one of them.
Yeah.
I'm unsure on I think there's 4 maybe.
There's 4, right? Yeah. So that's what I heard as well. What I initially read before rewatching this episode, and I wanted so badly to believe because it would be such a cool touch, I think. The introduction of Asuka here, we keep getting this looping animation in these different recited lines, and it's a different voice every time. I had previously read and believed that these were the different voice actresses who played Asuka in different English dubs, and that they in fact added a 4th repetition of that cycle to get the other actress in. And I was like, that's really cool. Now, the context of that was it wouldn't be like their voice from that scene in their version of the dub. It would have been like those voice actresses returning, doing like their normal voice or whatever, which is why they sound different. I was like, that is so cool. That is an awesome creative choice by Netflix. Yeah, it's not the case. Not the case. It is Risuko, it is Misato, it is the class rep, and the 4th one is just Asuka.
Ray might be in there, I believe, too.
Maybe Ray was the 4th one. But every time these are happening, it says, I'm Asuka Langley Soryu. Nice to meet you. The next one is, are you an idiot? And then it's that kind of sly, like, here's my chance, which that came from episode 8 when she first sees the opportunity for her to prove herself for the first time. And then, of course, her throwing herself at Kaji. I'm an adult now, so look at me. And every time she's trying to rip open the shirt and everything, that's when you get that fracture effect again, like from the very start. And Asuka is just denying this the whole time. She's saying, no, that's not what I am. That's not how I am, whatever. But it's like the angel can see inside her. And so the reason it makes sense that it's Misato, Risuko, class rep, and all that is it's the people who we've talked before about this concept. Again, the direct see, the you that exists within someone else. These are how these other people see you. And so they're showing all these people see her this way. And so it's almost like she can deny that's who she is. But if all these different people see her in this exact same light, it's kind of like, are you different though? And I think the whole thing is just kind of like her own psychological identity crisis, essentially, of like the kind of person she is or how she perceives herself, breaking down the ego barrier they've talked about before, to try and break her, essentially.
That's good. I like that.
Yep.
So she talks about her mind being defiled at this point, and right before that she says, you won't help me, you won't even hold me, you won't do anything for me.
She's talking about Shinji.
Yeah.
Because she sees like she sees Kaji amid this like all these like ghostly figures, tries to run to him, and then he basically is just like, "Oh, you're still just a kid." And then she like looks around the corner of Kaji and like Shinji's there as if he's like coddling Shinji. It's such a weird fucking visual. And then that's when the anger turns towards Shinji. Yeah, the exact dialogue. What the hell are you doing here? You won't help me. You won't hold me. You won't do anything for me. No one, no one, no one. And then you get Child Asuka bawling again. Please look at me. And that's the full break here that we're starting to go into. Sorry, I cut off. Go ahead.
No, so we go to this next part here, and Shinji's offering to go help with the situation because he can see that Asuka's in bad shape and she needs somebody to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And Gendo says that they must avoid any situation where Unit 1 gets corrupted, and then tells Rei to go to Dogma for the spear, to which Futsuki is not.
He's aghast. He's like,
this.
"You can't be serious." Yeah.
You're not going to do that, are you?
Can I back up just a little bit, just because I did all this translation research? So after Asuka's starting to like have her full break, the angel's like, "Tell me, do you like me?" And she's like, "I'm not going to depend on anyone." And the angel's basically like, "I know you're lying." That's when you get the flash of all these words in Japanese on the screen. Went through a lot of translation for this. These are the words that appear on screen in rapid succession: internalization, father, mother, missing, uncertain, separation, escape, contact, obsessive compulsive, attachment, dependent, void, sympathy. The phrase "I'm not a doll," the phrase "don't violate me," stop, no, it hurts, I hate you, emotional reliance, dormant masculine protest. That's a phrase I'm like, I don't know what that is. Don't be, which is actually one of the subtitles of the episode. Actualization, reaction formation, shadow, opposing will, compensation, don't be that, which I think is another subtitle, secondary title, temporary, assimilation, rationalization, forget, deception, reason for existing, confidence, childhood experience, sense of loss, compensation, symbiosis, hostility, oppression, I as in self, death.
Now, while you were reading those, I was having a seizure on the floor from the rapid flash of light. So we both got something different out of that.
Yeah, that was a pretty intensive animation there that I was just like, I'm glad I'm not watching this in a pitch dark room. Oh, wait, that's how Matt usually watches.
Yep. I was just like, ah!
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's jump back to Rei going to get the spear.
Yeah, so Gendo says it's the only means to defeat a target in orbit that is out of AT field range. Dear Lord, can't read my own handwriting. And then Misato makes mention of by allowing Adam and Ava together, risk triggering the third impact. Which that's because she's under the belief that
she's testing
Ava. She's just checking information right now.
To see if what they told her.
This?
Yeah, that's what they were led to believe this whole time. Like,
that's how the second impact was started?
Yes, that's what they were officially told was the cause of the second impact, and so she's almost saying it like testing him. And when he gives no reaction at all, she's just like, he's fucking lying. Like, I knew that was a lie. Exactly. Yeah.
So this proves to her second impact was not caused by contact with an angel. And she asks herself, what was the cause at this point? Futsuki is saying it's too early.
It's too early, basically, to do this. Yeah, it's going to piss off the council. And Gendo basically is saying, I like this phrase he has. He's like, one cannot move back the hands of time, but he can push them forward. Which is basically like, we were going to do this anyway. They're already mass producing Avas, so they've kicked up their game to try and adjust for what happened previously with Unit 1. Now we have to do the same, essentially, is what I take from this. But it's a very risky thing because you're a little surprised he's effectively like doing this to protect Unit 2, which was previously suggested to be disposable. And he's even willing to let Shinji in some way Well, he's not letting Shinji engage, I guess, but he's taking his advice, which also would not have expected.
Yeah, so we get that turn back the clock thing, and there's a mention of Sele won't stand for this, but it must be completed before Sele sets things in motion, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And Rey goes, she removes the spear, and as that spear gets removed, this thing grows its legs back.
Yep.
I mean, almost instantaneously. Now, it's still got little creatures hanging from its, midsection around where it was before there were legs.
Yep.
But I'm thinking at this point, what just happened? What did that do? What was this spear stopping? Because something is going to happen as a result of this. And is it really to the point? Was the spear needed? Did they have to kill this angel? Could they have waited it out? Or
did the spear kill the angel? Oh, you're talking about for the one in the sky?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
something.
was the end worth the means at this point, or was it just to look like, hey, no, we needed the spear to kill this angel, or was it I need to get rid of the spear to move to our next phase?
Yeah, Gendo getting rid of the Spear of Longinus is not going to make Sele happy. It's going to complicate things for them. And Gendo, I think, in his calculations of his plan, still has a path to success that doesn't require the spear. And so he almost is using it as the excuse to get rid of it. Like, what do you want me to do? I had to do something. We couldn't risk losing Ava Unit 2. Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. And even then, I'm filling in with my own deduction there a little bit. I don't know for sure that's what he's doing, but that's what seems to be the case. So Rey heaves this son of a bitch of a spear, and it streaks across the sky, looks ginormous, hits the AT field. You think for a moment it's going to stop. Then it almost like propulsions itself through the AT field and just utterly obliterates the angel. Like nothing left. And then it's just floating in space, lost forever.
And I don't know, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but he makes a mention of Unit 2 and saying that it's unwise to use or to lose Unit 2 yet. Mm-hmm. And my thought behind that is because he knows that they're going to be in competition with other Avas, and maybe there will be a fight between Avas.
Mm-hmm.
Fingers crossed. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get to him. He's used it. He's not going to be in any good standing with Sele at this point. Mm-hmm. And then we're to be continued at this point, right?
Almost. So we have the recovery of Unit 2, and we actually see that Asuka is alive. Even though earlier it seemed like she was flatlining, it's almost like her psychological readings were, I guess, just totally broken after that montage of effects in your seizure. But yeah, Asuka is alive, but the psychological contamination effects appear to be very significant. Shinji tries to greet her, like he goes and he's like, hey, I'm glad you're okay, which I get that he's trying to comfort her. It's good that he's trying to comfort her, but I feel like he goes about it with possibly the wrong phrasing. If he had asked, are you okay? I feel like it would have been greeted different. Maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered at that point. Probably wouldn't have, in fact. But by saying, oh, I'm glad you're okay, she basically snaps, screw you, I'm not okay. Having that woman of all people save me, having someone like her save me, I wish I'd just died rather than be saved by her. I hate it. I hate all of you. I hate you all to death. Yeah, she's pretty much donezo at this point. Like she is mentally fried, broken. You mentioned earlier the RAPE word and everything. There's a point too where she's in there almost just pleading to Kaji again, which is another one of those things that's like just kind of sad. Talking about how she's been soiled and how she's here it is. My mind, my heart, it's been defiled. Mr. Kaji, what do I do? I've been soiled. I'm dirty now. Like she just feels completely violated, physically, mentally tortured and everything, and given everything else that's going on and where she's at mentally, like she's done. There's no way she's going to be able to pilot an Ava after this. There's no even real assurance of what kind of life she could lead after this. It's just like totally broken now. And God knows Nerve doesn't exactly have a good therapy program.
Why? What do you mean?
Oh man, it's a heavy episode. I know. So you said it's not your favorite. You didn't like it mostly because you don't like Asuka's character. It's too late in the game to try and explain her away and do all of this. I agree that some of this stuff could have been explored earlier with, I think, better preparation ahead of time. You could have covered some of these bases without getting into like the real depth of it. Because when she first meets Misato, she asks Misato, like, you know about my past then? And Misato says yes. So you're like, oh, okay. So she should understand her better than anyone and have an idea of how to grasp it. Or if someone else doesn't understand why she's acting a certain way, Misato should be able to say, well, given what she's gone through, or, just something where it's like an understanding, almost defending Asuka. You literally never get that. Misato is not a good guardian. And it's not just the fact that her other half of her responsibilities require her putting these kids in the line of danger every day, basically. It's really just like she really does gravitate towards Shinji, coddle him, try to protect him, and she puts everything, all of her hopes and dreams and ambitions onto Shinji, which is selfish. He calls her out on that too. But it basically forsakes Asuka in the process. Maybe if she had just had Shinji and she hadn't also taken Asuka in, it could have been different. Yeah. Like if Asuka was like, if there was that degree of separation there, they could have coexisted a little better. Maybe not just because of the Kaji thing, but I don't know. It feels to me like monumentally like Misato failed Asuka so profoundly. And it's like, that's just a recurring theme in her life. Like her mother, not there for her. Her father, a doctor, which is also going to be an incredibly busy profession where you're gone a lot. Her mother has this close contact thing that just psychologically breaks her, results in her talking to this doll like it's Asuka. As she's talking about like, die with me, Asuka, the imagery makes it seem like the mother ripped the doll's head off or strangled it, whatever, tried strangling it, thinking she was basically killing Asuka. And so I'm almost putting like all these little pieces of dialogue together, thinking like, so was Asuka's mother basically trying to convince Asuka to like die with her because she didn't want to die alone? And then even as 5-year-old Asuka is like, okay, yeah, I'll die with you. Just don't stop being my mommy. Her mom's like, all right, great. And then like goes and starts strangling the doll in front of her. Like, you just think like mentally, like what that would do to a child, not just seeing that, but like seeing like, even after all of that, you're still being abandoned, even as you're like accepting and embracing of death at that point. Her father obviously immediately going and boinking another woman and getting married immediately. Cause she's still like 5 years old when they're referencing her new mom, and so she didn't want to deal with anything. She didn't want to process anything, didn't learn how to deal with any of that. And so it was just like, okay, I'm just going to grow up and I'm just going to not need this. I don't need any of you. I'm just going to grow up, not need anybody. And I'm going to be the best. It's like her entire thing. It's her and Shinji are two sides of the same coin. But they have similar traumas, but they go about it in opposite ways. Whereas Shinji is a people pleaser and just wants to do what people ask, so they'll like him that way. Asuka's like, I'm just going to go be so great and like amazing that you're going to have to acknowledge me. But I need you to acknowledge me. It's not just like, I'm going to go be great and that's good enough. I need you to recognize how great I am. And we know that Rei and Shinji came into the program later on, but Asuka was plucked somehow from this. She was brought up, and for a time, she was considered the best Ava pilot in the world. She spent years training doing this. And now, granted, it's not like there were a lot of pilots back then, but still, she was the best. This gave her purpose. Kaji was the one who basically plucked her out of this obscurity, told her she mattered for the first time, the first person who seemed to see her. And then they come to Japan only for Kaji to immediately have his attention diverted to Misato, which makes sense from his standpoint. But to Asuka, that is an abandonment. And then she tries to grow this connection with Shinji, but he can't reciprocate it because of his own baggage. So then that's an abandonment. That's That's a rejection, even though she's the one who, because she can't be close to people, Hedgehog's dilemma, she's pushing him away just as much as he's pushing her away. Misato isn't connecting with her, and she's failing her as a guardian and as a commander. It's just like across the board, you see like domino effect of how everybody is failing her. And then it's just like, are you surprised she's like this? Like, are you surprised that she's this angry and bitter and pissed off, and how the one thing that ever seemed to give her purpose and meaning, again, her mom worked for Nerve as well. So the Ava, piloting an Ava, to her probably was like somehow like almost a tribute to her mom to an extent. Like, okay, maybe in memory, she at least can look at what I'm doing and how I'm doing this and be proud of me. You know what I mean? But now even that is taken away from her, and she's losing her Ava. And it's just like everything is gone. There's nothing left. And so all it fosters is this anger towards herself and this resentment of others. And then that shit happens with this particular angel. And it's just like, there's nothing left. There's nothing left of the human being underneath after something like that. That's why I love this episode. Rant over. And there's even shit I can't go into yet because it's still getting ahead.
Don't do it.
I didn't, but we'll talk again.
Okay. I look forward to it.
Yeah. So yeah, have I at least somewhat changed, maybe not changed your overall perspective, but have I at least given you some insight where you're like, okay.
No, I see where
I'll concede a little ground.
Will I change my mindset on her?
No.
Depends on how things go in the future. But give me something good to look forward to with her. Give me a moment of grace and just her not being a huge, big old bee to everybody. And, maybe you'll turn me around. I liked her at first.
Yeah.
I really was so happy about her introduction, and now I've just grown to hate her.
Yeah, remember how all I'm going to say is remember how I described her earlier on in the show, and a show littered with this sort of thing, how she was the most this. Yeah, that's her character is not done. I think as far as the lashing out and being just bitch to everyone, I think that has largely run its course now, but her character is not done yet, or in general. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. We have 2 episodes left before the basically 2-part finale of the series, and then we have the end of Evangelion. So things are heating up. Things are moving. And while, as I've said before, I really wish they had dispersed a lot of this information earlier on, it kind of felt like they either had backstory they were sort of figuring out on the fly and just had to cram in late, or they maybe knew a lot of it, but they didn't figure out where to put it in earlier in the season or series. And so it just kind of like is left there until they're staring down the last however many episodes. And they're like, oh, okay, here's an entire episode of this. Here's an entire episode of this. And it's just information overload.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the stuff moving forward, it'll still be dense notes for us, but it's more of an interpretive sense and theory sense. Whereas this one is like, I got to get specific lines of dialogue, and I got to get this scientific term or psychological term or whatever they said, and then I got to look it up and do all this shit. I feel like that's going to dial back now. Good. From memory.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah, it should not take 2 hours to watch an episode and take notes, but that's where we've been for a little bit, and it's been mixed results. A lot of good, but also admittedly stuff that could have been done better.
Yeah. So,
yeah. I think that more or less wraps us up for this episode. That was me going on a long-winded tangent, so apologize for that. But those are our takes. You may deem them cheap, but to you we say, screw you, Akari. We're going to go do our own thing. We're going to watch episode 23 next week, and we will be back. What is episode 23 called? Episode 23 is, appropriate, Tears. All we got, Tears.
Great. At least it's going to be a happy one.
Tears, ... and sunshine. No. Yeah. I was going to say, like, I was going to rattle off the remaining titles, and I was like, wait, nope, I don't even want to do that. Yeah. 23, 20. Yep. Okay. So we'll be back soon with more episodes, and we're gonna see where we go from here. How Asuka's gonna rebound after horrific psychological warfare and the total breaking, dissolving, whatever of her ego. But until next time, guys, I've been Derek.
And I've been Matt.
Peace.
See you guys.